Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. My friends, how many days have you spent where you're busy all day and yet you feel like you've got nothing done? Now, part of that can be a story in our head that we struggle with, right? We may have, seen 25 patients. We may have answered 60 messages that have come in our inbox, right? We may have been doing a lot of things and yet still get to the end of the day and feel like we've got nothing done. Now, part of that, of course, is that there are often too many things on our plate. I don't think that I have to convince you of that at all. I think that it is very clear that not only do we as physicians have undoable amounts of work to do, but also our societal pressure just tells us to do more, do more, do more. You should have all of these accomplishments. You should be crushing it as a parent and dealing with whatever it is that you're taking care of, pets, aging parents, babysitting your neighbor's kids, whatever it is, you should just be on top of it. So some of it absolutely falls in that vein, but we also face an inordinate, amount of interruptions in our day, many of which didn't exist 3 years ago, 20 years ago, right? So many of them are new things that we've had to learn to navigate. Now, I'm going to date myself a little. I am, as of this recording, 44. I was born in 1981. We didn't have email until, it was probably sometime in middle school or high school. Now, I'm sure that the older adults incorporated email much earlier than I did. I remember AOL Instant Messenger coming out, I believe, when I was in high school, and that being something that I could communicate with friends on, but I had to dial in on the modem, right? And it was slow and it took up the phone and all of those things that people in my age group will remember. Some of you listening may be younger than I am, but still there has been lots of things that have rolled out. Text messaging coming as ubiquitous as it is, the transition from flip phones to smartphones, the stupid Epic Messenger thing that acts like Teams meetings, messengers, these things that are embedded within our EMR, as though it's a good idea to interrupt physicians in the middle of the clinic visit with a patient with a message about some other patient in some other circumstance. I am so grateful that I left my big organization that was on Epic before they rolled that out. But I can only imagine that if I am in the middle of having a difficult discussion with somebody, if we were talking about a new diagnosis, or I'm doing their pap smear, and a message pops up in the electronic medical record about a different patient who is at the front desk and checked in late, or some order that needs to be put in for some, non-urgent thing somewhere else. No, thank you. So much of the time when I am talking with other physicians, especially those who are experiencing things like that or struggling to keep up with their email, there's this constant sense of failure, of why can't I keep up with these things? It is not reasonable. It is not good for our human brains to try and notice all of the different things going on. If you were a patient sitting in the room with your physician and they get a message about a different patient, do you want them to stop what they're doing and address that thing? No, just like you don't want anyone knocking on the door and asking non-urgent questions. You want their attention. We as physicians, we as providers also want to be giving our attention to the person in the room, not worrying about the next patient, not wondering, oh, did I send the order on that last patient? Not not replaying these conversations over and over and over again. We want to be present, and yet there are so many interruptions and distractions. I was recently reading the book Free to Focus by Michael Hyatt, and not a physician, and kind of one of these guys who has a career where he has been able to set very clear limits and boundaries. I've read a lot of these types of books, and I will say that I get nuggets out of them. So there's things in there, but there are so many things that are unique to our jobs as physicians where we have appointments or we're scrubbed into surgery or we're in the middle of a conversation with a patient in the hospital telling them about a new cancer diagnosis, right? There are so many things that are really pertinent and relevant to our work as physicians where these interruptions and distractions are a major problem. And we are also normal human beings who experience negative thoughts and negative emotions, and we'll try to keep ourselves distracted to avoid more of something that we are not looking forward to. That is also a reality. I see you. I know you. I send my love. What I want to share with you today is some thoughts on both interruptions and distractions that come in this book, because I do think there's, again, some helpful information here. And I want to unburden us from the belief that we should be able to not only see our patient, but also complete the note and also respond to all these quote unquote urgent messages that come in that are not urgent, that should not be asked to us at all, and is really a way, honestly, for a lot of people to avoid the discomfort of needing to follow a different path, right? We think about the front desk person. I don't think I have any people who work in that role listening to my podcast, but that front desk person who has a patient who's checking in late, maybe the patient is upset, maybe they don't want to disappoint that patient. And even though there's a policy, oh, you can't check in 16 minutes late for a 20-minute appointment. It's after 15 minutes, right? Maybe there is a clinic-wide policy. It's very clear. And the front desk person knows that, but because they can quickly message the physician or maybe the MA who's working with them, or they go knock on the door, right? They can displace their discomfort by pushing it on to whoever is the next person who can say yes or no. I want us to see that that's what's going on, and I want us to set some better boundaries around that, because if we constantly allow those interruptions, we are going to stay stuck. Now, let's talk about that specifically, since I'm mentioning that. What do I mean by allowing interruptions? What I mean is that if somebody interrupts you with something like that really there's a policy in place, or they just should not be interrupting you with this, that could wait for later, I want you to learn how to not respond. So, for example, if you had that obnoxious epic messaging component and you're in the middle of a patient visit, I want you to not respond to that front desk person. I want you to not respond to it. If they knock on the door and they ask you that same question, I want you to say politely, I can't answer your question right now. Please refer to the policy. Simple. The more that we take actions like that, the more that we teach people it's not okay to interrupt me. If people are paging you, same thing, super obnoxious. I don't know how much people are using pagers these days. I think it's much more common to get some kind of a text message, but to take the discipline of, I'm not responding to that. I can't respond to every message that comes in whenever somebody wants to message. There's a quote in the book that I think was really resonating, which is that an email is as though you've opened up your to-do list to everyone in the world. The same way with a text message, right? Everybody who texts you with a question, a concern, task, something that they want you to do, it's as though they are running your life if you constantly allow that interruption to derail you from whatever you're doing. We know from brain science that multitasking is a myth. When we are constantly changing our attention from one thing to another, we are not really engaged. We are much slower. We will seem like we're being very productive, but really, truth be told, everything is moving more slowly. We're less likely to finish projects. It is a major problem. So, in this instance, right, thinking about, I want to have very good boundaries that if somebody messaged me through the thing, if they knock on the door, if they are texting me, I am not responding to this question, this message, until I've decided that it's appropriate for me to respond, right? If someone's coding in the lobby and I need to run out, that's different, right? That is a true emergency, a medical emergency. Somebody who checked in 16 minutes late for their 15-minute appointment, not an emergency. I don't need to respond. This is a hard one. And sometimes we get pushback on it. But if we get pushback, I want us to find polite language to ask whoever is, coming at us and say, it's really just not appropriate for me to interrupt patient care, which is unsafe, in order to answer these non-urgent questions when we have a policy in place. It's not appropriate. The more of us saying words like that communicate something. And again, we can ask them, if you were in an appointment, let's say with your oncologist, you have a new breast cancer diagnosis, do you want your oncologist to be interrupted as you are talking with them about some non-urgent question that someone else has? No, you do not. Why is that not true of me taking care of my patient? That is an offline conversation that you are not going to have in the moment, but it is an important one because it has become so ubiquitous to interrupt physicians in order to ask these questions. Yes, if there's something medically urgent going on, yeah, come get me. But much of the time, it is not that. It is someone else's discomfort in having to follow a policy or maybe their lack of awareness and them thinking, the easiest path is to interrupt that person because they'll answer my question, right? Are you the nice one in the office? Are you the one who always allows themselves to be interrupted? You know what I mean. You get it the worst of all, right? The person who has boundaries or is difficult or cantankerous when they're interrupted, they don't get as many interruptions. Now, I'm not saying go and be cantankerous or a jerk. Please don't do that. But we can set clear and kind boundaries. I can't answer that question right now. You can ask me later. I can't answer that question. Please refer to the clinic policy. Can't answer that question right now. I need to wait until this appointment is over. I need you to wait until this appointment is over. Clear, kind language. Keep it centered around the patient. We can't interrupt the patient visit like that. Again, unless there's an emergency, a true medical emergency. So it's really important that, we're mindful of that. It's also important that we don't interrupt ourselves. A lot of people struggle with emails, right? Or inbox, let's say non-direct messaging sort of things, but right, there's all these tasks in the email. If you are, let's say, in the middle of your clinic morning and you're rolling through visits and you don't have time to get into your email or your inbox, do not open it. Don't. Because inevitably there's going to be something in there that catches your attention, that creates some worry or some stress. You might just open it and see the number of portal messages that are in there waiting for you and start freaking out. Don't interrupt your flow when you need to keep going. You can choose to have set times that you look at things. You can choose to start training others to know your response cadence. I'm not going to respond to you right away. I will sometimes get an email or a portal message from somebody, and I could answer it right then and there. choose not to, because I want people to unlearn that I'm just going to immediately respond back to them. We need to set some healthy boundaries. And if you're someone who struggles with this, I love you. I'm sending you all the hugs that you want, because it's hard. We feel like we're disappointing people. We feel like we're not meeting their expectations, but there is no way to create a sustainable life for yourself without setting some boundaries and teaching people how you will respond so that they have the opportunity to learn how is it appropriate to interact with you, right? There are many things that we get asked that really aren't appropriate for us, that really should be handled by somebody else, or people, need to refer back to the policy because we probably put it in place before for this very same reason. So another strategy here is that you can let your staff or let your patients know when you will respond, and doing this in kind of a generic way. So pretty common in the days of, patient portals that there's some kind of messaging that it will take X amount of time for someone to respond to you. That can be different in different settings, right? It might be your message we'll get to it within 48 business hours. It might be longer than that. It might be less time than that, but you will teach people what to expect. Now, we all know that no one reads it when it's written, like, oh, your care team will take up to 48 hours, right? Because people will start calling after 6 hours and say, why is my message? Obviously, they're not reading that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this problem. But when we are able to clearly communicate with people, I'll usually respond to your lab results when I receive them within 24 to 48 hours. I'm setting up that expectation. As soon as it pops into their portal, it's probably not the moment that I'm going to be looking at it and sending them an instant message, right? It is going to take a little bit more time, but their anxiety goes down when they know that I'm going to respond to them usually within 24 to 48 business hours, or, hours on a business day, whatever. Similarly with our staff, right? You may work with, let's say, a team of nurses who are taking phone calls, doing triage sort of the stuff, and maybe they're constantly interrupting you and asking you questions, right? They're not being evil or wrong, right? They are trying to help and they don't know what to do, right? And they're looking for guidance. We can teach them. I'm not available to answer non-urgent medical questions in the middle of clinic. I am available between this time and this time, right? Some designated time, perhaps in the middle of the day or towards the end of the day. If you get a lot of messages and your team has a lot of questions, of course, there may be a role for some kind of written guidance or someone who's more available to answer questions, a doc of the day type situation. But you can also train people. You can come ask me questions between 12 and 12:30 when I'm done with patients for the morning. Something like that. Now, I know what you're saying. You're like, I'm never done seeing patients in the morning before the afternoon starts. That is a different boundaries issue, my friends, and we can talk about that another time. But I want us to get into the rhythm of making some decisions about when it's okay for people to come ask you questions, because they will. And if we don't make some decisions about when it's okay, then we are at the whim of everyone else, right? Everyone else just assumes that they can interrupt us all day. It's not good for our brains. It's not good for us getting things done. It can become unsafe. So let's work on that. So interruptions are typically external to us, right? They are things coming usually from someone else that are getting in the way of the flow that we're in. People who are writers, or do some other kind of work where they're not face to face with patients, they're not in and out of meetings all day. They may set up, chunks of time. They've got their phone turned off and they are out of contact, right? There are different strategies. And all of us deal with distractions. And you can think about distractions as being more internal interruptions, right? So distractions are things that we do to disrupt ourselves. And I thought there were some really, kind of important pieces that he mentions in here, but also I just want to recognize again how often this comes up in conversations that I have with physicians and certainly in my own experience. How often in the middle of your work segment. So again, if it's your clinic half day, right, the morning session or the afternoon session, if you're in the middle of a shift in the hospital, in the emergency room, I'm not a surgeon. I have to imagine that surgeons probably don't get overly caught up with us in the middle of surgery because there's so much to pay attention to, but you guys correct me if I'm wrong. But how often are we in the middle of that kind of work, right? Seeing patients in whatever setting we are, and we find ourselves feeling a little bit bored, irritable, frustrated, like our energy is super low, right? Some kind of way. We live in this medical space, right? We live in this space of the flow of taking care of patients, whatever that looks like for you. And it can get a little boring and tedious, right? If you are, I don't know, let's just say you've got all well child visits all morning and you've done well child visits, many days in a row for 10 years. It can be a little bit boring. We don't have to judge ourselves. We do the same things over and over and over again. That is part of expertise. That is part of what makes us expert in the work that we do. But sometimes we get a little bored. And what happens when you get a little bored or irritated or frustrated? You look for distractions, right? You pick up your phone and start scrolling, or you go check a website, right? You do things when you're bored that derail you from staying focused. Now, I want to just put in here, you're not broken. You're not abnormal if you are a little bored and you need a little break, but let's recognize the sensation of feeling bored or irritable or frustrated, and let's choose to take care of it differently. Because if your constant way of dealing with boredom or low energy or whatever it is something that is ultimately not working well for you, such as hopping on social media or, grabbing a donut or coffee or something else that you don't need at that time, really, or is not working for you. Maybe you are used to grabbing coffee in the middle of the afternoon, but you find yourself struggling with sleeping, right? In the moment, it's solving the problem, but ultimately, in the long run, it is not helping you. So if you find yourself in a pattern like that, what do you want to choose to do instead, recognizing that that's a frequent time when you get a little bored or antsy, right? What do you need to do? Do you need to do some deep breathing? Do you need to do some jumping jacks? Do you need to, I don't know, have something funny that you can choose to do that isn't going to reel you in so that you get stuck, right? We want to be able to just recognize that normal humans need a break, be able to find a quick hit break that ultimately serves us well in order to refocus so that we can stay on task and finish up, right? If we are someone who really struggles with closing notes as we go, or, getting through the bleepity bleep inbox, right? We might need to intentionally put a little break in there. Normal humans take breaks. Normal humans, if you think about the traditional clock in, clock out schedule, right, there's certain time windows that they are supposed to take short breaks and then a lunch break and then another short break in an 8-hour day. Our days are not structured like that, but guess what, guys? We've got human brains that need a break. So find some quick hit little breaks. Again, moving your body, taking some deep breaths, um, you know, quick interaction with a colleague, something that is going to take care of that bored feeling or that antsy feeling, kind of you think about just kind of sweeping it out of your system so that you can come back into focus, so you can get your stuff done. Now, that sounds a little tough love approach, and I don't want to discount the impact of burnout and depression and exhaustion and overwhelm that we feel chronically stuck in. Let's not discount how much that slows us down. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a much more mild sense of just bleh, just I'm bored. I wish I could go home, kind of sense, because it's a little boring to do the same things over and over again. I do believe that we can find joy and interest and curiosity again, but I also think that we need to acknowledge that doing the same things over and over and being really expert in areas comes with a little bit of automatic default boredom, and that's okay. So in these moments, choose to take care of yourself and figure out, what am I going to do differently in order to not do the thing that's not serving me. Okay. Another part of what he describes in the distraction section is multitasking. And I want to read this quote, which comes from Clay Shirley. Multitasking provides emotional gratification because it moves the pleasure of procrastination inside the period of work. So that's a really interesting idea, right? That when we are multitasking, we are moving procrastination into the work that we're doing. What does that mean? What that means is that we are allowing ourselves quick hits of dopamine from constantly sort of switching our interests around. But ultimately, we accomplish less, and that distraction keeps us from getting stuff done that we need to get done. So let's say I have finished my patient visit. The note is not yet complete. The patient is out of the room, and I hop on to something else. I check my email. I check the inbox. My next patient is ready, so it's not as though I've got a ton of time, but I don't close the note. I choose something else. Now, you could choose to set up your flow that way. It's up to you. But let me tell you what happens, right? So let's say I go and I grab a message from the inbox, or I check my email. And then I do that for a couple minutes. Oh, okay, right. And then I'm like, oh, I don't have time to finish this note. I need to go into the next room, right? I need to go see that next patient. So I've left that note undone. Now let's contrast that with, if I spent the 2 minutes finishing that note is done within 2 minutes. Now, if I went and I did my email, right, and I sort of took my brain away from that patient that I just finished seeing and into some other task, right, another patient in the inbox or something in my email with my kid's school, whatever it is, I've taken my attention off of that. When I come back to finish that note, that same patient note of the patient that I had just seen, right, but now it's been some hours or maybe some days since that time, it is going to take me longer to finish that note because I am not thinking about that patient. I can spend 2 minutes at the end of the patient visit, even better if you can get it done with the patient there, but if you can't, right, 2 minutes to finish the note now and make it good enough now to sign off, to, drop the pill, like get it completely out of my way. Or I can come back to it when I've got a huge pile of unopened patient notes, and then I have to remember, oh, what did we say we were going to do, and which side had that spot on it, and what did it look like, right? It takes me longer to go back to that time, and so I might spend 10 or 15 minutes finishing that note, whereas it would have taken me 2 minutes. That's a great example of how we can be procrastinating inside the task, right? You could say, well, it's kind of all the tasks of a day in clinic, but I have procrastinated because I wanted to I wanted to do something else rather than sit and have the discipline to finish the note now. And ultimately, it has cost me more time. And I'll say that's like really double true if I didn't go to my inbox to do some other clinical task, but I went to my email and got distracted by, again, something at the kids' school or some stupid policy that's rolled out, or something that I don't need to know. Not helpful. And if we want to think about how do I keep my work, my medical work, more contained into the amount of time that it's supposed to take, this is a really important area to work on. Can I have the discipline to sit and finish this note, that patient I just saw, in order to keep going, or will I let myself get distracted by something else? All right, I know all of you are like, oh God, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. I hear you. I'm not perfect at this either, but I think it was such a good way to think about it that I wanted to point our attention to it. A third thing that he points out is that when we allow ourselves to get distracted, we are usually picking a downhill task. And he defines uphill task as, something that feels a little challenging to us, but ultimately is more productive or more effective in some way, compared to a downhill task, which is some kind of task. And maybe it needs to be done, although maybe it doesn't need to be done by me specifically. But ultimately is kind of busy work that doesn't really make a big difference. And again, I think we could look at this example of the uphill work is getting this note done when I have seen this patient, right? So my brain is still in the zone, and, maybe I don't want to close the note, because who amongst us loves sitting there and like finishing it up? I don't know anyone who loves doing that. We might we might like clicking sign of like, oh gosh, I'm, like now I'm done, but we don't like actually sitting there and typing the note. Like, who would? That's not exciting work. But what's the higher yield here? The higher yield here is the more often I stick with the uphill task of finishing this note and getting them done, then I reach the end of my day with all those notes done. And, in the medical world, the note done is, what allows us to do the billing, right? And sort of complete, this is in the insurance-based world, but, I see a patient, I have to write a note. I have to complete the billing, right? And sign it all, right? And send it off to the insurance company, however that happens, right? In order to have the payment go through. And you could say, well, I'm salaried, so that's not how it goes in my book. But I'll promise you this, that if you are never signing notes and you are never sending off the bills to the insurance company, I don't care how you're paid, that's going to be a problem because you are not finishing the work. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Downhill work is all the other stuff, right? I don't need to read the email that goes out to the whole class from my kid's school in the middle of my day. Now, you could say that's not an unproductive thing. It's not a terrible thing to do. It's, I'm not scrolling Facebook, but it isn't helping me to be more effective. It isn't helping me to get out on time. It's definitely taking my brain offline from the task that I'm supposed to be focused on. So if you just look at it from that perspective, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, maybe I'm choosing the downhill task because my normal brain wants something that's less taxing. Again, can we choose to do something differently, just like we did when we were bored? We might be bored, be bored and like, I don't want to finish that note. That's kind of boring. I'd much rather hop onto Facebook or like see if somebody sent me an exciting email. When does that happen? If I do that, right? Could I choose to just recognize my brain really wants a break here? I'm going to finish the note because that's important, but then I'm going to take a little break. Then I'm going to take some deep breaths. Then I'm going to do some jumping jacks. Then I'm going to, I'm going to shake my hands. I'm going to do something that kind of clears that sense of boredom out of my system but I'm not going to let that derail me from getting my notes done because that is something I got to do. Do you see how this happens, right? Where we come out of a patient visit, we've got probably more visits to go, right? Or more patients to see on our rounding sheet. And we want to do something easier, but ultimately our day is going to be better if we choose to just stay focused, just write the note, get it done because we are thinking about this patient right now. We are going to have our best thinking right now, right? Just get it done. Now, people will sometimes say, but I need to think about it more. And, what if I remember something later that I want to add? There's no problem. You can go and add an addendum. There's no problem. That will happen to all of us. And sometimes it's worth adding something, right? Sometimes you've had some brilliant insight, but how often does it happen that you're keeping your notes open, hoping to have some brilliant insight, but in the meantime, you've got 30 open charts. Your mind is in a million different places. It's widely distracted. It's really hard to be present with whoever you're in front of, whether that's another patient or your kids or your spouse or your dog, right? Like you want to be present. You got to close those notes because that's a bunch of open tabs in your brain. So let's choose to do the work to minimize our interruptions and our distractions. So again, the folks who write these kinds of books, right? A lot of men, to be honest, who work in jobs where they don't have 20 appointments on their schedule. They're not in and out of the operating room or a million hospital rooms, right? They work very differently. But some of these examples and ideas are very relevant to us. And so let's not completely throw them out. Let's choose to see the interruptions and decide that we're going to have some boundaries about when and where we respond to people. If your office is constantly bombarding and interrupting you electronically or knocking on the door, and it's keeping you from being able to stay present and focused and get your work done, you're going to need to start deciding to set some boundaries. Again, we want to do it with clear, kind words. We want to make ourselves available at some period of time. Yes, I'll answer your questions, but it's really important that you not interrupt me during this time. Or here's this policy. When patients arrive late, I need you to pull out the policy. I need you to say, yep, nope, it's, they've checked in 16 minutes late. We have a 15-minute limit. We're going to have to cancel or reschedule or see if somebody else is available. We're not going to constantly go and interrupt the doctor because we're uncomfortable sticking with the policy. This is important stuff. When it comes to our own distractions, if we see that we're in a pattern where we're constantly keeping ourselves distracted, where we're trying to do too many things at one time and we're never getting our notes done, or we're never staying on task with something that we need to be doing, we need to start looking at that and decide what we're going to do. We have normal human brains. Our normal human brains don't like uncomfortable emotions, right? And we are constantly looking for dopamine and relief and breaks. Nothing is wrong with us. We are not lazy, awful, terrible people. We just need to make some different decisions. My friends, I hope that you find this helpful. Would I recommend that somebody read the book? I don't know. There were some good things in there. And I think these were what seemed to be the most important nuggets. He does talk a lot about the need to take good care of yourself, to get good sleep, good nutrition, regular physical activity, all the usual kind of stuff. I don't think that you need to read his words in order to acknowledge that those things would be great. But when we acknowledge that these things, right, that interruptions and distractions, which are so ubiquitous in our world, are keeping us from getting work done, they are adding to that what seems like never-ending list of tasks. When we can learn to set some boundaries, when we can learn to retrain our brain to recognize when we need a break, to choose to do something that is actually going to be restful and allow us to re-engage, when we can choose to complete the work and just get that stupid note done, right? We are going to be much better off. And then, you know what? We're going to find it easier to sleep and rest and exercise and do all those things. Now, conversely, you could say, well, hey, when I sleep better, when I exercise more, it's also easier to set boundaries and expectations with other people. Great. Self-reinforcing. That sounds so much better than the burnout cycle that we get stuck in, doesn't it? Take this to heart. I will not be stopped by interruptions anymore outside of medical emergencies. I will not let my brain get disrupted. I will not blame myself or say unkind words to myself. I will just choose to make some different decisions. We can all learn this. That's what I have for you today. Until next time, be well. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.